I'm Michael. My wife, Sarah, our daughter Emma, and our son Lucas decided to head to our mountain cabin to spend the winter holidays. Our vehicle was a large SUV capable of carrying all of our family's belongings. The weather was clear and sunny when we started our journey. A few hours into the drive, there was a light snowfall warning on the radio. Sarah suggested, maybe we should turn back? But I replied, we can handle a bit of snow, and decided to press on. By the afternoon, the weather took a sudden turn. Heavy snow began to fall and visibility rapidly decreased. The GPS showed us a shorter route, diverting us from the main road. Even though this route was shorter, it was less traveled and completely covered in snow. Lucas asked, "Dad, why is it so dark?" The snowfall was so heavy that it seemed as if night had fallen. I exchanged a worried look with Sarah. The road was narrow with winding turns. Even with our snow tires, the vehicle sometimes skidded. As we turned a corner, we saw an old car half buried in snow. Inside the car was a frozen family. I immediately stopped. Sarah and the kids were in panic. I got out of the car and approached. Inside the vehicle, I could see terrified expressions on the faces of the frozen family. It seemed they got caught in the snowstorm and froze to death while waiting for help. I immediately tried calling 112, emergency number, but there was no signal on my phone. Sarah insisted, we must turn back from this road right away. However, finding our way back was also challenging as everything was blanketed in white. Hours later, we finally reached the main road and got a signal on our phone. We immediately called for help, but the rescue teams couldn't find the old car and the family inside. We spent the night in the nearest hotel. The next morning, when we told the hotel clerk about our experience, he said, "This story is told by a few travelers on that road every year. That family disappeared on the same road 20 years ago and was never found." The incident became an unforgettable experience for our family, and we decided never to head to the mountains during winter again. I had always enjoyed long drives at night. The tranquility of the deserted roads and the soft hum of my car's engine usually brought me peace. However, one particular night as I drove down the scarcely used Whitestone Road, things took a different turn. The road was surrounded by dense woods on either side, with only the occasional break of a driveway or private road leading to houses I could never see from the main road. That night, there was an unusually thick fog that seemed to rise out of nowhere. The moonlight made the fog glow in a soft white sheen, almost giving the road a dreamlike quality. As I delved deeper into the fog, I noticed something strange. Every once in a while, my headlights would catch a fleeting shadow crossing the road ahead. At first, I thought it might be a deer or some other wild animal. However, as I continued, the figure became more distinguishable. It looked like a person, but every time I tried to get a closer look, it would vanish into the mist. Growing more anxious, I decided to speed up to get out of the foggy stretch. Just then, I saw the shadowy figure standing right in the middle of the road. Slamming my brakes, I came to a screeching halt just inches away from it. My heart pounding, I squinted to see through the dense fog. There, standing eerily still, was a woman in a white dress with her hair covering her face. She made no motion, and I couldn't tell if she was looking at me or if she was lost. Summoning the courage, I lowered my window just a crack. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no reply, only silence. Then, without warning, the woman slowly began to move towards my car. Gripped by a sudden surge of fear, I floored the gas pedal and sped away, leaving the ghostly figure behind in the fog. When I finally reached home, I was shaking. I never took the Whitestone Road again, especially not at night. To this day, my story sends shivers down the spines of those who hear it. Some say the woman in white still roams Whitestone Road, waiting for the next driver to come her way. I, Derek, work as a real estate agent in villages outside the city. Due to my job, I often travel to many remote villages. One day, I set out to show an old farmhouse located 50 kilometers outside the city, which hadn't been sold for years. My car was a bright blue Chevrolet, and I had named it Bluebird. That day, I decided to try a new route with Bluebird. When I entered the route into the GPS, it showed me a shorter way. However, this route was not marked on the map. Still, seeking a little adventure, I decided to give it a shot. After a while, I came upon a narrow and winding road. The road was flanked by forests on both sides. As I continued, an old bridge made of red stones appeared before me. At the beginning of the bridge, there hung an old sign reading, "Turn back." Yet, I took this warning as a joke and decided to cross the bridge. Right in the middle of the bridge, my car suddenly stopped. I couldn't restart the engine. At that moment, in my mirrors, I saw a figure wearing a black cloak at the beginning of the bridge. The figure was signaling with its hands, indicating that I should not come any closer. Panicking, I tried to start the car again. After a few attempts, the engine roared back to life, and I quickly sped away from the bridge. At the next village, I narrated the incident to an old shopkeeper. His eyes widened as he said, "You shouldn't have entered that bridge. Many people lost their lives in an accident there years ago. They now guard that bridge." This experience taught me that sometimes, roads unmarked on maps are unmarked for a reason. I, Leonard, enjoy using long highways during my business trips, especially the old and seldom used highways in Arizona. These roads are typically empty and ideal for speeding. One day I was on one of these highways returning from work. My close friend Jake was with me. It was close to sunset, and the sun was setting in a crimson hue on the horizon. Suddenly, up ahead in the middle of the road, I saw a man with a suitcase in his hand. He was slowly walking toward the side of the road. As we approached, I noticed he was in a dirty old suit and his face was pale. Slowing down the car, I tried to figure out what was happening. Jake looked out of the window and asked, "Have you seen him before?" My answer was no. However, oddly, I felt like I had seen this man somewhere before. When he reached our car, he stopped and looked at us. His eyes had an expression filled with fear and pleading. Extending the suitcase to us, he said, "Please, deliver this to the right person," and then slowly retreated. In shock, we took the suitcase and immediately continued on our way. A few minutes later, when we looked back, the man was no longer there. Upon opening the suitcase, we found an old photo album and a letter inside. The letter revealed that the man was a war veteran, and he wanted us to deliver the suitcase to his family. The suitcase had been lost for 40 years. That night, we found the family that owned the suitcase and returned it to them. When we learned the man's story, it turned out he had an accident on this highway 40 years ago and lost his life. This incident became an unforgettable experience for both Jake and me. Driving cross-country, I often found myself in forgotten parts of the world. This particular evening, I stumbled upon a decrepit old gas station nestled between two hills. It wasn't on the map, but my tank was nearing empty. The place seemed abandoned, with cracked windows and an old rusty sign that read, "Last Stop." Despite the unsettling atmosphere, my car's blinking fuel light made the decision for me. As I pulled up to the pump, an eerie silence enveloped the place. No wind, no distant car noises, just the low humming of what seemed to be an old radio from inside the station. Walking towards the entrance, the door creaked open by itself. Startled, I hesitated, but eventually decided to peek inside. The room was dimly lit, with old newspapers scattered everywhere and that old radio playing tunes from decades ago. Suddenly, the radio's static grew louder and shifted into a clear voice. "Why are you here?" it whispered. I froze. Trying to convince myself that it was just a broadcast prank, I approached the counter to find a way to pay. There, scribbled on an old note, were the words, "Leave what you owe, and leave quickly." Throwing a few bills on the counter, I raced back to my car and sped away. As the old station became a tiny speck in my rearview mirror, the radio's whisper seemed to linger in the air. Some roads are best left untraveled. To this day, I can't find any record of that gas station's existence. But sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet, I swear I can hear that whisper again, warning me of the paths I choose.